The first time Kieran Wallace saw an alien cry, it wasn't out of pain, it was fear. He stood nervously in the sterile, egg-shaped mebe of the Earth Galactic Exchange Institute, a facility hidden deep under the Nevada desert. Around him, the curved white walls shimmered faintly, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and the faint tang of ozone. Monitors beeped softly behind him, tracking vitals in a dozen languages. On the bed in front of him, a pale green figure shook violently, its slit-pupilled eyes locked on the blood pack hanging from an four stand. Kieran shifted his weight and glanced at Dr. Riona Ashby, the chief xenobiologist and his current boss. "You're sure he's not allergic to O-negative?" he asked under his breath. Riona, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for talking down screaming diplomats and reckless cadets alike, didn't look up from her tablet. "He's not allergic. He's terrified. That's different." The alien's name was Desh, a Yilari student from the outer spiral of the Tarsus Loop. His kind had a circulatory system, not unlike humans, but they'd never developed internal medicine. Their science focused on external bioaugmentation, patches, sprays, even light therapy. The concept of injecting someone else's blood into your veins was, to them, not just unhygienic. It was horror movie material. Desh whimpered and pulled his arm close to his chest. You taken another's life fluid. Not your own. Not purified. Another's." Kieran nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's called a transfusion. It saves lives. But it is. Not your life," Desh whispered. His pupils shrank to pinpricks. "How do you not reject it? How do you not become them?" Kieran walked around the bed and crouched to Desh's eye level. "Because our bodies know how to share. If the blood type matches, it's like borrowing jumper cables. You get a boost until your own system can take over again." Riona stepped in, tapping the forebag. "Desh, if we don't do this, you're going to suffer organ shutdown. Your blood counts dropped too low. You lost nearly a liter when your circulatory gland ruptured." "I did not agree to this Earth process," Desh hissed. "You signed the emergency treatment waiver when you enrolled," Riona said flatly. "And we're not injecting cow's milk. This came from a screened, healthy donor." Desh turned to Kieran. "Was it you?" Kieran blinked. "No, but I've donated before." "Did it hurt?" Desh asked. "Not much. Kind of like a pinch." Kieran held up his forearm. "Look, no scars." Desh's gaze flickered from the arm to the fore, then back again. But what if I feel?" "Your thoughts." "You won't," Kieran replied. "It's blood, not memories." Desh didn't move for a long while. Then, slowly, he lowered his arm. Riona nodded to the medtech. "Start the drip." The fluid flowed into Desh's vein, a slow, steady red stream. Kieran watched as the alien flinched, then clenched his jaw, his entire body tense. But he didn't scream. He didn't convulse. He just stared. 2 hours later, Desh was asleep, his vitals stable, the bag empty. Kieran leaned against the wall, arms folded. "That's the 5th alien this year," he muttered. Riona closed her tablet. "This group's more open-minded than the last batch. But blood transfusions still freak them out. It's going to take time." 2 weeks later, Kieran found himself back in the med bay, but this time bleeding. He'd been escorting another group of Yilari students through the desert terrain near the institute when the rover hit a rock shelf. The vehicle flipped. Everyone else had minor bruises. Kieran, who'd been standing, slammed into the roof and then the dash. His left arm was a mess of purple and red. He winced as he stared at it. "Don't move him yet," Riona said, cutting open his sleeve with scissors. "We need a scan first." One of the Yilari students hovered nearby, her fronds trembling. "He is leaking," she said. "That's called bleeding," Kieran muttered. "Yeah, I noticed." The medtech brought the portable scanner over and waved it across his arm. Riona frowned. "Fracture in the radius. Possible microfracture in the ulna. No arterial damage, but he's lost more blood than I'm comfortable with." Kieran grunted. "So, I get a transfusion." "You get your own blood back," Riona replied. "We've been storing your Type O units for emergencies." A short time later, he was strapped to the bed, fur in his arm, blood flowing back into his system. Desh stood at the door, watching. You were receiving it?" Desh asked. Kieran was pale, his lips slightly blue. "Yeah." Turns out I'm just as squishy as you. You do not fear it? I don't have the energy to fear anything right now. Desh stepped closer. I thought, when you donated it was only sacrifice. I did not realize you could also benefit. Kieran gave a weak chuckle. It goes both ways. That's the miracle part. Desh looked at the forebag. I thought it was invasive, but it is repair. Kieran closed his eyes. Exactly. Over the next month, something unexpected happened. Desh began to volunteer. Not for transfusions, he still wasn't ready for that, but to assist in the medbay. He helped document vitals, observed procedures, and asked questions. Lots of them. Riona noticed. He's got the curiosity, not the stomach yet. Kieran, now out of the sling and doing therapy for his arm, joined Desh during a routine plasma separation. You're not going to faint this time, right? I will not, Desh said firmly. I have practiced looking at red fluid for 10 minutes a day. Blood, Kieran corrected. You can just say blood. Desh hesitated. Blood. Nice. Desh turned. I have requested to be screened. For compatibility. To donate. Kieran's brow furrowed. You sure? Desh nodded. If I am to study Earth medicine, I must understand it. Not just the theory. The sacrifice. Later that week, Desh lay flat in the donor chair, pale but resolute. His blood slightly blue-green, more viscous than human plasma, flowed into a collection bag. It wasn't the same as human blood, but it was rich in compounds Earth researchers were eager to study. This was a new frontier. Kieran stood beside him, arms crossed. You did something huge today. Desh's eyes fluttered. I feel dizzy. Yeah, that's normal. You'll get juice and crackers. I do not know what juice is. You're about to find out. By the time the semester ended, Desh wasn't the only one. Word spread among the alien students. Not all donated, but none panicked anymore when a red bag was wheeled in. Transfusions became less of a taboo, more a curiosity. One day, Riona called Kieran into her office. You've got a visitor, she said. Kieran stepped in and found a young Yilari, barely out of adolescence, standing nervously beside the desk. This is Prell, Riona said. He's Desh's cousin. He arrived yesterday. He had an accident during orientation. Broke a leg. He's going to need a transfusion. Kieran looked at the trembling student. First time? Prell nodded quickly. Kieran pulled up a chair beside him. Let me tell you a story. There was a guy named Desh. He was scared too, but he learned something important. And as the bag began to drip, Prell didn't scream. He just listened. The medbay lights dimmed slightly as the afternoon sun passed behind the dune ridges above the subterranean institute. A subtle rhythm of filtered air hummed through the vents while soft footsteps echoed toward the recovery wing. Kieran leaned against the doorframe of the observation suite, his arms still stiff but functional. Two Yilari students sat on the floor beside a cot, their long limbs folded awkwardly, like grasshoppers trying to mimic human posture. One of them, Prell, cradled a cup of thick orange juice as though it might leap from his hands without warning. Your cousin said you were curious about how we make the plasma separate, Kieran said, gesturing toward the centrifuge unit in the corner. Prell's wide mouth opened, then closed again as he glanced at the machine. It spins so fast, but the fluid does not become damaged. It's not about speed for the sake of it, Kieran said, walking over to the unit. It's about density. The heavier parts of the blood settle at the bottom. We're not harming anything, just organizing it. The other Yilari, a taller female with mottled violet skin, tilted her head. But the components still function after being pulled apart? Exactly. Red cells, white cells, plasma, we store or use them separately depending on what the patient needs. Prell blinked slowly. You do not just return it all at once? Not always. Sometimes we only need one part. During trauma care, red cells are gold. Platelets help with clotting. Plasma's used in burns or infections. It's like customizing the help. The taller Yilari's fronds twitched. Earth medicine is like disassembling a fruit and feeding it piece by piece. Kind of, Kieran said with a grin. Except the juice saves lives. Prell stared at the centrifuge. If the blood is separated from itself, is it still the same blood? Depends what you mean by same. Functionally, yes. Philosophically, Kieran shrugged. That's more your department. Prell looked down at his own veins, faintly glowing under his translucent skin. When I received the transfusion, I expected visions. Fragments of memory. I dreamed of deserts. But I think it was just the sedative. Well, unless someone slipped you a postcard, Kieran said. Probably just your brain trying to make sense of all the new nutrients coming in. Prell hesitated. I did not want to admit it, but I felt stronger right away. The instructors warned us about relying on Earth medicine too quickly. They did. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Yes. They said your species uses intervention as a first solution, not the last. That it makes you reckless. Kieran crossed his arms. That's not wrong. But sometimes waiting until it's the last option means you don't get a second chance. The taller Yilari stood and moved toward the vitals monitor. May I? Kieran nodded, watching as she gently pressed her finger to the screen, adjusting the display. You have a name? She turned. Zev. I am studying comparative physiology. He extended a hand. Kieran. I'm the local test dummy. Zev considered his hand, then offered a delicate wrist instead. Kieran bumped it lightly, and she seemed satisfied. Your bones, she said abruptly. They fuse after injury? If the break is clean and we set it right, yeah. We use a splint or cast, sometimes internal rods. The body does the rest. Zev squinted. We cannot achieve that. Our skeletal tissue regrows, but never binds naturally once disrupted. We rely on external scaffolds. That's why you're here, Kieran said. To learn how our meat bags work. Prell stood slowly and walked toward a slim refrigeration unit. What is inside? Donated plasma, Kieran said. Wanna see? Prell hesitated, then opened the door. Pale yellow bags lined the racks, labeled with alphanumeric codes and timestamps. It resembles nutrient gel, he muttered. Plasma's mostly water, but it carries proteins, electrolytes, antibodies. Zev leaned in. Antibodies. You use them to fight disease. Exactly. We can even extract them and give them to someone else to help them recover faster. Zev stepped back. That is disturbing. Kieran tilted his head. How come? You take the body's defense memory and share it. That is like opening a locked door and handing the key to thousands of strangers. Yeah. And if one of those strangers is about to die, that key saves them. Prell looked thoughtful. Do you ever forget which key belongs to whom? Not really, Kieran said. We do compatibility checks every time. Blood typing, cross-matching. It's not guesswork. Zev pointed at one of the bags. How long does it last? Frozen plasma? Up to a year. Red cells, about 40 days. Platelets? Only 5. 5. Prell looked alarmed. They're fragile, Kieran said. We have to keep donating constantly. That's why donors are so important. Prell turned as if just realizing something. You do this as a habit? Without being told. Some do it every month, Kieran said. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't do it for applause. You do it because someone might need it. The door opened behind them. Dr. Riona stepped in, her coat slightly unbuttoned, tablet under one arm. You three planning to live in here? She asked, glancing at the centrifuge. We were learning, Zev said quickly. Riona glanced at Kieran. Did you tell them about the bone marrow thing yet? Didn't want to traumatize them, he said. What is the bone marrow thing? Prell asked instantly. Riona sighed. You're going to want to sit for this. They gathered around as she pulled up a digital model of a human femur. We can harvest stem cells from inside the bone. They're like blank slates. They can grow into any kind of blood cell we need. Prell blinked. Inside the bone? Yes. We use a special needle to draw it out from the pelvic crest or sternum. It's not pleasant, but it's life-saving. Zev looked ill. Why would someone endure that? Because kids with leukemia need it. And because we don't like giving up on people. Prell looked at Kieran. Have you done it? Twice, he said. Long time ago. Both kids lived. Zev turned back to the centrifuge. You humans are flexible, but also relentless. Riona chuckled. You should see what we do when we're upset. Later that evening, as dusk settled outside, the students filed out. Prell lingered. I believe your methods are extreme, he said softly. Yeah, Kieran replied. We get that a lot. But they are also beautiful. He turned and left without another word. Kieran stayed a moment longer, staring at the refrigerator full of plasma. It hummed quietly, indifferent to its contents. The weight of it wasn't just in liters or milligrams, but in time hours sacrificed by strangers, veins tapped in fluorescent rooms, arms braced while warm blood flowed away for someone they'd never meet. He hadn't thought much about it when he first donated. Just a favor, a good deed. But now, watching alien students wrap their minds around the concept of giving without return, he realized it wasn't just medicine they were studying. It was something far harder to teach. The next morning, Riona found a note on her desk. It was from Zev. I would like to observe marrow retrieval next time. Kieran read it over her shoulder and gave a low whistle. Think she's ready for that? Riona smiled faintly. She didn't say she wanted to watch a human. She said she wanted to see the procedure. Kieran frowned. Wait. You mean she wants to volunteer? Riona tapped the tablet open. Let's find out. Zev arrived at the procedure suite 20 minutes early. She stood perfectly still in the corner, her limbs tucked tightly against her narrow frame, eyes fixed on the prep station. No twitching fronds, no questions not yet. Kieran watched her from his stool near the supply cabinet, quietly organizing gauze packs by color for no real reason. She hadn't spoken to him since the note, and he wasn't about to push. 2 human medtechs moved around the room, checking equipment. The donor, a middle-aged man with a calm expression and a soft belly, sat on the edge of the reclining chair, chatting with the nurse about football, which Zev clearly didn't recognize as a subject worth investigating. When the nurse dabbed his lower back with antiseptic, Zev's pupils narrowed slightly, but she didn't shift. Riona entered at 1:30, glancing between the donor and Zev. She's just observing, she told the team. No interaction. She'll stay out of the sterile zone. The nurse nodded, adjusting the sterile drape. Kieran moved closer, whispering, still time to back out, you know. Zev didn't look at him. I have reviewed the footage from 4 previous procedures. I have mapped the steps and memorized the recovery profile. I am here to confirm the subjective factors. You mean the part where the guy doesn't scream and try to flee? Precisely. The nurse guided the donor to lie face down. The local anesthetic went in first, a small injection just above the pelvis. The donor flinched, then relaxed. After a few minutes, the aspiration needle was inserted with steady pressure. Kieran watched Zev closely as the needle entered the bone. She blinked once. Then again. Her chest expanded slightly, the equivalent of a deep breath. But she didn't move. A thin tube carried the thick, red marrow into a collection bag. The sound of the extraction, a soft, wet suction, was barely audible, but Zev tilted her head toward it. You all right? Kieran asked under his breath. I thought it would be more violent, she said. The nurse looked up. It's not. Most people feel pressure, not pain. We numb the periosteum. That's the sensitive part. Zev nodded once. And he will regenerate the volume? He'll be tired for a few days, but his body will replace it. It's like giving up one apple from a tree that grows hundreds. The collection finished within 20 minutes. The nurse removed the needle, applied pressure, then dressed the site with a padded bandage. Want juice? She asked the donor. He grinned. Only if it's grape. As the medtechs cleaned up, Zev finally stepped away from the wall. She circled the now filled bag of marrow slowly, like it might vanish if she blinked. This is not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Kieran asked. Ritual, ceremony, hesitation. She paused. But he was telling jokes. That's how we cope, Kieran said. You've seen how we deal with pain. We usually try to laugh before it hurts. She looked at him. Is it always this informal? Depends where you are. Here, yeah. We trust the system. The stakes are high, but the vibe's low. Zev turned to Riona. May I access the post-op interview? Riona tapped her tablet. Already approved. He consented for teaching use. Zev turned back toward the door. Then I am finished here. Kieran followed her out into the corridor. So, still want to volunteer? I will not yet donate, she said. But I will assist. I wish to map the human response to marrow loss across 3 recovery phases. Sounds like you're writing a paper. I am. Tentative title, Functional Altruism, Voluntary Trauma and the Human Desire for Relevance. Kieran raised an eyebrow. Catchy. Later that week, she returned to the medbay not as an observer but as part of the prep team. She didn't touch any patients her physiology didn't match regulation standards, but she helped inventory supplies, tracked vitals, and translated xenolinguistic files for visiting physicians. She moved with eerie precision, her thin fingers gliding over the displays, her eyes scanning faster than most humans could follow. At one point, Prell rushed in carrying a fellow student, another Yilari who'd collapsed during a field anatomy module. He is convulsing. Loss of coordination. He said his vision was recursive. Sounds like hypoglycemia, Riona said, guiding them onto the nearest cot. Kieran grabbed a glucometer while Zev brought over a glucose injector. The student's skin was clammy, his fronds limp. Kieran pressed the device against the student's forearm. Blood sugars crashing. Let's go. Zev handed him the injector. Intramuscular? Subcutaneous. He lifted the student's arm and pressed the injector just beneath the dermal folds. The hiss was soft, and within seconds, the student's eyes fluttered. He blinked twice. I was flying, he mumbled. You were fainting, Kieran said. Not as cool. Prell exhaled sharply. I thought he was dying. He wasn't, Zev said. But next time, do not let him skip nutrient breaks. I told him not to fast, Prell muttered. He said it would heighten sensory absorption. Kieran snorted. Tell him next time to absorb a protein bar. Once the student was stable and sipping a recovery drink, Riona stepped aside with Kieran and Zev. You two made a good team, she said. I have recalibrated my discomfort, Zev said. Human responses are more predictable under pressure than I assumed. What about human unpredictability? Riona asked. Zev hesitated. That remains. The following week, a cross-species seminar brought in students from a dozen planets. One of them, a tall, spiral being from Vexari Prime, had a blood composition that coagulated near oxygen. During a live demo on universal transfusion theory, his sample solidified mid-presentation, jamming the device. The instructor panicked. The Vexari student began to wheeze. Zev stepped forward. His outer membrane is desiccating. Cool the ambient field. Kieran grabbed a chill wrap and activated it. You sure? Yes. Vexari blood stabilizes at lower temperatures. The oxygen saturation was too fast. They wrapped the student's torso in the cooling sheath. Within moments, his breathing slowed, the wheeze fading. The instructor looked dazed. I didn't think of that. Zev didn't respond. She was already logging the event in the system. That night, Zev approached Kieran in the faculty lounge where he was nursing a mug of tea and a sore wrist from restocking the clinic's heavier supplies. I have completed my paper, she said. Already? It is only a preliminary draft. But I have reached a conclusion. Kieran sat back. Let's hear it. Humans do not give blood because they are fearless. They give it because they have accepted fear as irrelevant. He let that sit for a moment. You're saying we don't care about dying? No. You know you will die. But you behave as though it is negotiable. Kieran laughed. I've never heard it put that way. Zev's pupils expanded. It is a paradox. You risk yourselves constantly but with rules. You bleed but cleanly. You suffer but on schedule. You plan your sacrifices. It's called being useful, he said. We figured out early on that helping each other is the only way to survive. She tilted her head. There is no genetic incentive. Nope. Then why? Because it works. Zev stood silently for a moment, then tapped her tablet. Would you review my sections on procedural ethics? Sure, he said. Send it over. As she walked away, Kieran noticed something new in her gait. Not confidence, she'd always had that, but familiarity. She no longer moved like the walls might shift beneath her. She knew the corridors now, the people, even the sounds. The next morning, she entered the med bay carrying a container. What's that? Kieran asked. Nutrient infusion from my homeworld. It stabilizes energy loss after fluid donation. Planning to test it? I already have. You donated? No, but I assisted a Yilari who did. He is recovering well. Kieran opened the container and sniffed. Smells like seaweed and battery acid. She handed him a spoon. Just try it. He hesitated, then took a bite. Okay, that's definitely not FDA approved. Zev's fronts twitched in what might have been amusement. That afternoon, Riona posted the final list of accepted research abstracts for the Institute's symposium. Zev's name was there, followed by her paper title in bold, elegant script. Kieran tapped the glass. Looks like you're official. Zev looked at the list, then at him. It was not my intention to become one of you. You didn't, he said. You just helped make us a little more like you. She nodded once. Acceptable. And with that, she turned and walked back toward the lab, shoulders straight, pace steady, no longer a visitor in a world of blood and bone and borrowed cells. She belonged.